Alina Sorokin's body is still on Everest. She's at 600 meters, just below the balcony, frozen in the position she died in. Seated, slumped forward, her harness still clipped to a fixed line that leads nowhere. Climbers pass her every summit season. Most don't know her name. But every single one of them notices the same thing. There's a camera mount still bolted to her pack. The camera itself is gone. Someone took it. And what was recorded on that camera in the final 93 minutes of Alina Sorokin's life has never been shown to the public. 3 people have watched the footage. Their descriptions of what's on it don't match. Not even close. This is the full story of what happened on May 22, 2021, when a 34-year-old documentary filmmaker and social media influencer brought a 3-person film crew above the death zone on Mount Everest. She made them promise one thing before they left base camp. One rule: never stop filming, no matter what. They kept that promise. They filmed her summiting. They filmed her smiling. And then they filmed her dying. The documentary she was making was supposed to be pitched to Netflix. It was going to be called Above Everything. The pitch deck still exists. 14 pages. Professional. Polished. Page 9 contains the line: "We will capture what no expedition film has captured before, the raw, unfiltered truth of what happens above 8,000 meters." She got exactly what she asked for. But here's what every article, every climbing forum post, every social media take got wrong about Alina Sorokin. They called her reckless. They called her an influencer who cared more about content than survival. They said she ignored a Sherpa's warning because she wanted footage. That version of the story is simple, clean, easy to share. And it's missing about 80% of what actually happened. The Sherpa warning was real. Lakpa Dorje, one of the most experienced climbing Sherpas on Everest, told Alina directly that her film crew's equipment weight and slower pace were creating dangerous bottlenecks on the fixed lines. He told her this at Camp 4, the night before the summit push. He was right. But Lakpa's warning wasn't the only one Alina received that night. There were 3 others. And the most critical one, the one that would have saved her life if she'd seen it, was deleted before it ever reached her. That warning came from a meteorological service based in Innsbruck, Austria. It was a detailed forecast sent to expedition leaders operating on Everest's southeast ridge. It arrived by satellite email at 3:47 a.m. on May 22, 2021. The forecast was specific. It predicted a narrowing weather window. Wind speeds above the South Col would become unsurvivable by 2 p.m. The forecast recommended that any climber not past the Hillary Step by 10:30 a.m. should turn around immediately. Alina's expedition leader, a 46-year-old Russian mountaineer named Yuri Volkov, received that email. He read it. And then he deleted it. He never told Alina. He never told the crew. He never told Lakpa. If you're thinking this is just another story about a guide who made a bad call, you're still not seeing the full picture. Because Yuri Volkov didn't delete that forecast because he was reckless. He deleted it because he was broke. His expedition company, Summit East, had posted losses for 3 consecutive seasons. Alina's expedition was his biggest contract of 2021. The production company backing her film, a London-based outfit called Ridgeline Media, was paying Summit East $420,000. That contract had a clause, a completion clause. If the expedition failed to produce summit footage of Alina Sorokin, Ridgeline could claw back 60% of the fee. Yuri Volkov couldn't afford to lose $250,000. So he deleted a weather forecast. And a woman died. Now, if you're watching this and thinking you've got the story figured out, greedy guide, naive influencer, corporate pressure, slow down. Because the guide's financial desperation was only one thread. The production company had its own pressure. Ridgeline Media had already invested $1.2 million in pre-production for Above Everything. They had a tentative meeting with Netflix acquisition scheduled for July 2021. The entire pitch hinged on summit footage, not base camp footage, not acclimatization footage, summit footage. Alina standing on top of Everest. Without that shot, the project was dead. Ridgeline's head of production, a man named James Whitfield, sent a satellite message to the crew at Camp 4 on the evening of May 21st. The message read, "Summit footage is non-negotiable. Adjust crew positioning for optimal capture. Do not compromise the shot. Adjust crew positioning." That phrase would matter enormously 12 hours later, when the crew's positioning on the fixed lines created a 40-minute delay that pushed Alina past her turnaround time. And then there was the bottleneck. A competing expedition, a large commercial group from a Chinese operator, was ahead of Alina's team on the fixed lines above the South Col. This group moved slowly. They had 12 clients, several of whom had minimal high-altitude experience. They created a traffic jam at approximately 8,400 meters that lasted nearly 40 minutes. Alina's crew, already slower because of their camera equipment, was stuck behind this group. Lakba Dorje was furious. He radioed Yuri at base camp and told him the timeline was blown. He recommended turning around. Yuri told him to keep going. Lakba asked why. Yuri said the weather would hold. Lakba asked if Yuri had a forecast. Yuri said yes. Lakba asked what it said. Yuri lied. He said the window was open until 4 p.m. The actual forecast said 2 p.m. That 2-hour lie killed Alina Sorokin. If this story sounds more complicated than what you've read before, that's because it is. Every article about Alina's death tells the same version. Influencer ignores Sherpa. Influencer dies. Lesson learned. But that version protects the expedition company. It protects the production company. It protects the systems that put a woman with a film crew above 8,000 meters with a deleted weather forecast and a financial gun to everyone's head. This documentary is going to tell you everything. Every decision, every deleted message, every lie, every minute of the summit day that turned a dream into a death. And we're going to talk about the footage, the 93 minutes of video that Alina's crew recorded during her final descent. 3 people have watched it. Their accounts don't agree, and the reason they don't agree is the darkest part of this entire story. Before we get there, you need to understand who Alina Sorokin actually was. Not the caricature. Not the influencer who died on Everest. The real person. Because the woman who made her crew promise to never stop filming wasn't doing it for likes. She was doing it because she'd spent her entire adult life trying to make one film that mattered. And above everything was supposed to be that film. She'd sacrificed her marriage for it. She'd drained her savings. She'd turned down a stable production job at the BBC to pursue it. Every person who knew Alina said the same thing. She wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing a story. The problem is, she became the story. To understand how that happened, how a meticulous, intelligent filmmaker ended up frozen at 8,600 meters while her own crew recorded her last breath, you need to go back to where it started. Not base camp. Not the summit push. You need to go back to a small editing suite in East London, 14 months before the expedition, where Alina Sorokin first pitched the idea that would kill her. Because the seeds of her death weren't planted on Everest. They were planted in a conference room. And the people in that room, the ones who said yes, who funded it, who told her it was brilliant, they're the ones who have never been held accountable. That's about to change. If this is the kind of deep investigation you've been looking for, the full truth, not the headline, hit subscribe right now. Because we're just getting started. And what comes next is going to rewrite everything you thought you knew about this case. Alina Sorokin deserved better than the story the internet gave her. Here's the real one. Chapter 2. The woman behind the camera, Alina Sorokin, was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, in 1987. Her father, Dmitry, was an electrical engineer. Her mother, Natasha, taught piano at a local music school. They weren't wealthy. They weren't poor. Alina grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment near the Neva River with her older brother, Pavel, who would later become a software developer in Helsinki. The family was quiet, methodical, practical. Nobody in the Sorokin household did anything without a plan. Alina got her first camera when she was 14, a used Sony Handycam that Dmitry found at a flea market. He paid the equivalent of $40 for it. Alina filmed everything. Her cat, the view from her window, her mother's hands on the piano keys. By the time she was 16, she'd made a 12-minute documentary about the janitor at her school, a former Soviet naval officer who'd served on a submarine. The film won a Regional Youth Award. Nobody in her family understood why she cared so much about a janitor's story. Alina said, "Everyone has a story that matters. Most people just never get asked." She moved to London at 21 on a student visa. She enrolled in a film production program at the University of Westminster. She worked nights at a hotel front desk to pay tuition. She slept 4 hours a night for 3 years. Her thesis film, a 20-minute documentary about Georgian refugees in South London, was selected for the Edinburgh International Film Festival. It didn't win anything, but a BBC producer saw it and offered Alina a junior production role on a natural history series. She was 24. For the next 6 years, Alina worked at the BBC. She was good, reliable, technically skilled. She worked on 3 series, including one about extreme environments that filmed in Antarctica and the Karakoram. That's where she first encountered high-altitude mountaineering. Not as a climber, as a filmmaker. She spent 3 weeks at K2 Base Camp in 2016, filming supplementary footage for a segment that was ultimately cut from the final edit. But those 3 weeks changed her. She watched climbers leave for the summit and not come back. She watched Sherpas carry loads that would break most humans. She watched the mountain kill 2 people, a Hungarian climber and a Pakistani porter. And she watched how the expedition just continued. Business as usual. Breakfast the next morning. Jokes at dinner. That's when the idea first formed. Alina wanted to make a film that showed what really happened above 8,000 meters. Not the curated summit selfies. Not the inspirational Instagram posts. The real thing. The suffering. The decisions. The cost. She wrote in her journal that night, an entry her family later shared with investigators. "Nobody films the truth up here. They film the version that sells. I want to film what actually happens when the oxygen runs out and the weather closes in, and people have to choose between saving themselves and saving someone else." She left the BBC in 2019. Her colleagues thought she was crazy. She had a stable job, a good salary, a path to senior producer. She walked away from all of it. Her husband at the time, a British architect named Tom Calder, told her it was a mistake. They argued about it for months. The marriage didn't survive the decision. They separated in early 2020. Tom later told a journalist, "I didn't leave because of Everest. I left because Alina had already left. She was physically in our flat, but her mind was on that mountain every single day. I couldn't compete with it. Nobody could." By mid-2020, Alina had written a treatment for Above Everything, 47 pages. She envisioned a feature-length documentary following her own summit attempt on Everest. Filmed entirely by a dedicated crew she would bring above the death zone. The hook was simple but powerful. A filmmaker becomes her own subject. The camera never stops. Whatever happens, happens on film. No edits for comfort. No cuts for PR. Raw truth. She shopped the treatment to 14 production companies. 12 said no one. Said maybe. Ridgeline Media said yes. Now let's talk about Ridgeline. This matters. Ridgeline Media was founded in 2015 by James Whitfield, a former Channel 4 commissioning editor. Whitfield had a reputation for 2 things: finding undervalued documentary projects and extracting maximum profit from them. Ridgeline's business model was straightforward. They'd fund production, secure distribution deals with streamers, and take a substantial back-end percentage. Their margins were thin. Their overhead was high. By 2020, they'd produced 11 documentaries. 3 had been profitable. Whitfield needed a hit. When Alina pitched Above Everything, Whitfield saw it immediately. A young, photogenic, female filmmaker, Russian-born, London-based, climbing Everest with cameras rolling. It was a Netflix pitch wrapped in a bow. He greenlit funding within 2 weeks. $1.2 million in pre-production and expedition costs. But Whitfield attached conditions. The documentary had to include summit footage of Alina. Not an attempt. A summit. The entire narrative arc depended on her reaching the top. Without that footage, the story was, in Whitfield's words, Just another failed expedition with good B-roll. Alina pushed back. She argued that the film should work regardless of whether she summited. The truth of high-altitude climbing, she said, is that failure is more common than success. Whitfield disagreed. He told her, audiences don't pay for failure. They pay for triumph or tragedy. Give me one or the other. That sentence would haunt everyone involved. Alina agreed to the summit clause. She didn't love it, but she needed the money. She'd already spent $30,000 of her own savings on permits and preliminary logistics. Without Ridgeline, the project was dead. Now the crew. Alina handpicked 3 people. Marcus Beale, 37, British. Cameraman. He'd worked with Alina at the BBC and followed her when she left. Marcus was an experienced high-altitude cinematographer. He'd filmed on Aconcagua, Denali, and at Everest Base Camp twice. He'd never been above Camp 2 on Everest. He was strong, quiet, and fiercely loyal to Alina. When people later asked why Marcus agreed to carry camera equipment above the death zone, his answer was always the same. Because Alina asked. Priya Chandra, 29, British Indian. Sound technician and secondary camera operator. She'd never been above 4,000 meters in her life. Her high-altitude experience was 0. She was included because she was brilliant at sound design, and because Alina wanted a female presence in the crew. Priya trained for 7 months before the expedition. She acclimatized well. But she was operating far outside her experience level, and everyone on the team knew it. Lakba Dorje later said, "The sound girl should never have been above Camp 3. She was strong, yes, but strong is not the same as ready." Viktor Semenov, 41, Ukrainian. Drone operator and technical coordinator. Viktor was the most experienced mountaineer on the crew. He'd summited Elbrus 3 times and attempted Cho Oyu. He handled the technical logistics, battery management, data storage, equipment weight distribution. Viktor was practical to the point of coldness. He made spreadsheets for everything. He calculated that the crew's combined camera equipment weighed 31 kilograms. He warned Alina that this weight would slow them by approximately 15 to 20% compared to unburdened climbers. Alina acknowledged the risk. She said the footage was worth the delay. And then there was Lakba Dorje, 53 years old, born in Tame, Solukhumbu district, Nepal. He'd summited Everest 11 times. He'd been guiding for 27 years. He'd lost 4 friends on the mountain, 2 to avalanches, 1 to a fall, 1 to cerebral edema. Lakpa was hired by Summit East Yuri Volkov's company as the lead climbing Sherpa for Alina's expedition. He was not consulted about the film crew. He was not told about the completion clause in the contract with Ridgeline. He was not shown the weather forecast that Yuri would later delete. He was told to guide a client and her team to the summit. That's it. Lakpa's first interaction with Alina was at base camp on April 8, 2021. He watched the crew unpack their equipment. He saw the cameras, the batteries, the stabilization rigs, the drone cases. He didn't say anything that day. But that night, he told another Sherpa, a man named Pemba Chering, "This is going to be a problem." Pemba asked what he meant. Lakpa said, "They're bringing a film studio to the death zone. Weight slows you down. Slow gets you killed." Pemba would repeat this conversation to investigators 7 weeks later. Yuri Volkov. He's central to this story, and you need to understand what was driving him. 46 years old. Born in Krasnoyarsk, Siberia. Former Russian military mountaineer. He'd summited Everest twice, K2 once, and Kangchenjunga once. He founded Summit East in 2014 with the dream of running a premium expedition company. Premium meant small groups, experienced guides, high safety standards. For the first 3 years, it worked. Summit East had a clean record. 0 fatalities. Good reviews. Then the economics caught up. By 2019, the Everest commercial market was saturated. Larger companies undercut Summit East on price. Clients chose cheaper operators. Yuri took on debt. He cut corners. Not on safety, not yet, but on staffing, on equipment replacement cycles, on base camp amenities. By 2020, Summit East was $200,000 in debt. Alina's contract with Ridgeline was a lifeline, $420,000. Enough to clear the debt, fund the next season, and keep the company alive. But the completion clause meant Yuri's financial survival depended on Alina reaching the summit. If she turned back, Ridgeline could claw back 60%. Yuri would lose everything. He never told Alina about this pressure. He never told Lakpa. He presented himself as a calm, experienced expedition leader focused solely on safety. Under the surface, he was a man watching his life's work collapse, unless one woman stood on top of one mountain while a camera recorded it. These are the people. Alina, who wanted truth. Marcus, who wanted to help her get it. Priya, who was in over her head. Victor, who calculated everything except the human cost. Lakpa, who saw the danger and wasn't listened to. Yuri, who needed money more than he needed honesty. And James Whitfield, sitting in London, waiting for summit footage that would save his company. 7 people. 7 agendas. Not one of them fully understood what the others were hiding. And in 6 weeks, they would all converge at 600 meters, in a sequence of decisions so interconnected, so mutually reinforcing, that untangling who killed Alina Sorokin would take investigators over a year. Some would say the mountain killed her. Others would say Yuri killed her. Others would say Ridgeline killed her. And a few, the ones who've seen the footage, would say Alina killed herself, not through arrogance, through a promise she made her crew keep. A promise that should never have been made. What that promise actually meant, what it cost, and why Marcus Beale hasn't spoken publicly since 2022 is something we need to get into. But first, you need to understand what happened in the 48 hours before the summit push, because that's when the decisions were made. Not on the mountain, in tents, on satellite phones, in emails that were sent and deleted. The catastrophe on May 22nd didn't begin at sunrise. It began 2 days earlier. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, the only person who could have stopped it was Alina herself. She chose not to. And the reason she chose not to is the part of this story that nobody talks about. Chapter 3. 48 Hours of Lies, May 20th, 2021. Camp 2. 6. 400 meters. Alina's team had been on the mountain for 6 weeks. Acclimatization rotations were complete. Everyone was healthy. Freya had surprised everyone by performing well at altitude. No serious symptoms, steady pace, good appetite. Victor's equipment was functioning. Marcus had already captured what he called the best base camp footage I've ever shot. Morale was high. The summit window was approaching. That afternoon, Yuri Volkov held a briefing at Camp 2 via radio with the team. He confirmed the weather window. May 22nd. A 20-hour gap in the jet stream would create climbable conditions above the South Kernel. Multiple expedition operators had identified the same window. It was going to be crowded. Yuri estimated between 60 and 80 climbers would attempt the summit that day from the southeast ridge alone. Lakpa Dorje listened to the briefing. He didn't speak. When it was over, he pulled Alina aside. This is the conversation that every article mentions. The one that gets reduced to, Sherpa warned influencer, influencer ignored warning. But the actual conversation was longer and more nuanced than anyone has reported. Lakpa told Alina 3 things. First, the film crew's equipment weight would slow them by 15 to 20% on the fixed lines. This wasn't speculation. He'd observed their pace during acclimatization rotations. They were consistently slower than other teams. Second, a 60 to 80 person summit day meant severe bottlenecks above the South Cone, especially at the Hillary Step. A slower team hitting those bottlenecks would compound delays exponentially. Third, and this is the part that never makes the articles, Lakpa told Alina that if the crew's combined delay pushed them past a 1 p.m. turnaround time, he would personally refuse to continue guiding above the balcony. He would turn around. With or without them. Alina listened. She asked Lakpa what he recommended. Lakpa said, "Leave the crew at the South Kernel. Alina climbs with 1 camera, a small chest-mounted GoPro, and Lakpa as her guide. Summit light. Summit fast. Get the footage. Come home alive." Alina considered it. She genuinely considered it. Marcus later confirmed this. She went to her tent and sat alone for an hour. Then she made a satellite call, not to her family, to James Whitfield at Ridgeline Media in London. This call was logged by the satellite phone provider. It lasted 11 minutes. Neither Alina nor Whitfield ever disclosed the full contents. But Marcus was in the adjacent tent. The walls were thin. He heard Alina's side. She told Whitfield about Lakpa's recommendation. She proposed the compromise. GoPro only. No crew above the South. Colonel Marcus heard a long silence. Then he heard Alina say, "I understand." Then, "Yes, I know what the contract says." Then, "Okay, full crew, I'll make it work." When she came out of the tent, Marcus asked what Whitfield said. Alina's answer, according to Marcus's statement to investigators. He said a GoPro isn't a documentary. He said Netflix won't buy helmet cam footage. He said the crew goes to the summit or the project is dead. Marcus asked if she could push back. Alina shook her head. She said, and this is a direct quote from Marcus's testimony, "If I lose this film, I've lost everything. My marriage is already gone. My savings are gone. My BBC career is gone. This is the only thing I have left." The crew goes up. That conversation happened at 4:30 p.m. on May 20th, 38 hours before Alina's death. If Whitfield had said yes to the GoPro compromise, Alina would have climbed light, fast, and almost certainly would have summited and descended safely. Lakpa confirmed this in his own testimony. Without the crew, she makes it. 100%. She was strong. She was fast. The crew killed her, not the mountain. But Whitfield said no. So the crew was going to the summit. And now, the next decision fell into place. May 21st Street, Camp 4. The South Col 7, 920 meters. The team arrived at 2 p.m. after a grueling push from Camp 3. Priya was exhausted. Victor was functional, but slow. Marcus was the strongest of the three crew members. Lakpa assessed the team and made his second formal objection. He radioed Yuri at base camp and said, "This is from the radio log. Team is too slow. Priya cannot maintain pace above South Colonel. Recommend Priya stays. Send Marcus and Victor only." Yuri responded, "Full crew goes. Alina's orders." Lakpa pressed, "It's not about Alina's orders. It's about safety. The sound girl will create a bottleneck." Yuri's response, "She'll be fine. She acclimatized well. Keep the team together." Lakpa asked again, "Do you have a weather update?" And here it is. The moment. The lie that killed Alina Sorokin. Yuri said, "Window holds until 4 p.m. tomorrow. Plenty of time." The actual forecast, the one from the Innsbruck Meteorological Service that Yuri had received at 3:47 a.m. that morning and deleted, said the window closed at 2 p.m., not 4 p.m. 2 hours. Yuri gave Lakpa and Alina 2 extra hours that didn't exist. Those phantom hours would become the margin between life and death. Lakpa accepted the answer. He had no reason to doubt his expedition leader's weather information. He adjusted his mental timeline accordingly. If the window held until 4 p.m., then even with the crew's slower pace, they could summit by noon and descend to the South Col by 4 p.m. Tight, but feasible. What Lakpa didn't know was that the real deadline was 2 p.m., and at the pace the crew was moving, they wouldn't even reach the summit until 12:40 p.m. That left 1 hour and 20 minutes to descend from the summit to safe altitude. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. That evening at Camp 4, May 21st, Alina gathered the crew for a final briefing. This is where she made the promise, the one that would define everything. Marcus recorded this briefing. The audio exists. Investigators have heard it. In it, Alina says, "Tomorrow is the day. Whatever happens up there, the cameras stay on. If I'm struggling, you film it. If I'm crying, you film it. If I can't move, you film it." That's the whole point of this documentary, the truth. Not the pretty version, the real version. Promise me, no matter what happens, you do not stop filming. Marcus said, "I promise." Victor said, "Understood." Priya hesitated. Then she said, "I promise." Nobody in that tent understood what that promise would actually mean 16 hours later. Nobody imagined a scenario where, no matter what, would mean filming a woman die. But Alina did, at least partially. Because in her journal, recovered from Camp 4 after her death, she wrote an entry dated May 21st that reads, "If something goes wrong tomorrow, I want it on film, not for views." Not for drama, because people need to see what this mountain actually does. The pretty summit photos are a lie. The real Everest is the part nobody shows. Tomorrow, we show it. She wrote those words 12 hours before her death. She knew the risk. She accepted it. And she made 3 people promise to document whatever came next. Now, the summit day timeline. This is where every minute matters. May 22nd. The team left Camp 4 at 11 p.m. on May 21st, a standard departure time for a summit push. Alina, Lakpa, Marcus, Victor, and Priya. 5 people. 3 cameras rolling. Approximately 31 kilograms of film equipment distributed across Marcus, Victor, and Priya, in addition to their personal climbing gear. From the first steps, Lakpa noticed the pace problem. They were slower than the teams around them. The Chinese expedition that had departed at 10:30 p.m. was already well ahead. A Spanish team that left at the same time as Alina's group pulled ahead within the first hour. Lakpa estimated they were moving at 60% of optimal speed. The equipment weight was the primary factor, but fatigue was compounding it. Priya specifically was struggling. By 2 a.m., they reached the triangular face below the balcony at approximately 300 meters. They should have been there by 1:15 a.m. They were 45 minutes behind schedule. Lakpa radioed Yuri. "We're slow. 45 minutes behind." Yuri's response: "You have margin. Window holds until 4. Lakpa continued. At 3:30 a.m., they hit the first bottleneck. The Chinese expedition, 12 clients, multiple inexperienced climbers, was backed up on the fixed lines near the balcony. Traffic was stopped. Alina's team waited. Marcus filmed the traffic jam. Victor monitored battery levels. Priya sat in the snow, breathing hard. Lakpa stood apart from the group, staring upward, counting climbers on the ropes above. The bottleneck lasted 40 minutes. 40 minutes standing still at 400 meters. Burning oxygen, burning energy, burning time they didn't have. When the line finally moved, it was 4:10 a.m. They were now over an hour behind schedule. But Lakpa still believed they had until 4 p.m. So an hour behind felt manageable. In reality, against the 2 p.m. actual deadline, they were already in fatal territory. They just didn't know it, and there was one more decision made during that 40-minute wait. One that nobody talks about, because it seems so small. But it mattered. While they were stopped, James Whitfield sent a satellite message from London. It was received by Victor's communication device. The message read, "Summit ETA? Need to coordinate media release timing. Confirm crew position for optimal summit capture. Do not summit without full crew present and filming." Victor showed the message to Alina. She read it. She didn't respond, but she made a decision in that moment. Priya was the slowest member. Leaving Priya at the balcony would speed the team up significantly. Lakpa had already suggested exactly this, twice. But Whitfield's message said, "Full crew present and filming." Alina understood what that meant. All 3 cameras, all 3 operators. At the summit. Or the footage wouldn't count. She told Lakpa, "We all go up together." Lakpa asked about Priya's pace. Alina said, "She'll keep up." Lakpa looked at Priya. Priya was sitting in the snow, her head between her knees. She was not going to keep up. Everyone could see it. But Alina had made her decision, and Lakpa, bound by his role, frustrated but professional, continued upward with all 5 climbers. That decision added approximately 35 minutes to their summit timeline. Combined with the 40-minute bottleneck and the initial 15-minute delay, they were now 1 hour and 30 minutes behind a schedule that was already based on a lie. Subscribe if you're following every detail of this, because the next chapter is the summit push itself. And what happened above the Hillary step is something that 3 different people describe in 3 completely different ways. The cameras were rolling. The truth should be obvious. But what the cameras captured and what the witnesses say don't match. Not even close. The climb continued upward, and the clock, the real clock, not Yuri's fictional one, was already running out. Chapter 4, 93 minutes. The timeline from here is reconstructed from 4 sources. Lakpa Dorje's testimony, Marcus Beale's written statement, Viktor Semenov's deposition, And the metadata from the camera files timestamps GPS coordinates embedded in the footage. The footage itself has not been publicly released. But the metadata doesn't lie. And the metadata tells a story that contradicts what 2 of the 3 crew members said happened. 5:45 a.m. The team passed the south summit at 8,749 meters. They were now 1 hour and 50 minutes behind the schedule Lakpa had set. But Lakpa still believed the weather window extended to 4 p.m. In his mind, they had 10 hours of margin. In reality, they had 8 hours and 15 minutes. Still enough to summit and descend safely if nothing else went wrong. But things were about to go very wrong. 6:30 a.m. The Hillary Step. The most famous bottleneck on Everest. The Chinese expedition was backed up again. 7 of their 12 clients were clustered on the fixed ropes, moving at a crawl. Lakpa counted heads. He estimated a 20 to 30-minute wait. It turned out to be 55 minutes. During this wait, Priya collapsed. Not dramatically. She didn't fall. She just sat down on the ridge and stopped moving. Marcus noticed first. He went to her. She told him she couldn't feel her fingers. Her oxygen flow was steady. Victor checked her regulator, but her body was shutting down from exhaustion. She'd been climbing for 7.5 hours. She'd been above 8,000 meters for over 18 hours, including the night at Camp 4. She was done. Lakpa saw Priya sitting. He made his 3rd formal recommendation. He told Alina, "Send Priya down with Victor. You, me, and Marcus go to the summit. 3 cameras is not worth a life." Alina looked at Priya. She looked at Marcus. She looked up at the Hillary Step. And she made what investigators would later call the final consequential decision. She said, quote, "Priya stays here with Victor. Marcus and I go to the summit with Lakpa. When we come back, we all descend together." This was a compromise, not the one Lakpa wanted. He wanted Priya descending immediately, but better than taking the full crew higher. Alina had finally overridden Whitfield's instruction. She left 2 crew members behind. Marcus, carrying the primary camera, would be the only filmmaker at the summit. But here's the critical detail that changes everything. Priya and Victor didn't stay at the Hillary Step. They were supposed to. Alina told them to wait. But 20 minutes after Alina, Marcus, and Lakpa climbed past the Hillary Step, Victor made a decision on his own. He told Priya they should keep climbing. Slowly. He said, in his later deposition, that he believed they could reach the summit 30 to 40 minutes after Alina, capture additional footage from a different angle, and descend together as a full group. Priya protested. She said she was too tired. Victor told her the weather was fine. He told her they had until 4 p.m. He'd heard Yuri's fictional timeline repeated by Lakpa earlier. He believed it. Priya reluctantly agreed. They started climbing again. Slowly. Painfully. 25 minutes behind Alina. Lakpa didn't know. Alina didn't know. Victor and Priya were supposed to be waiting at the Hillary Step. Instead, they were climbing into the death zone with no guide, limited oxygen, and a timeline that existed only in Yuri Volkov's imagination. 8 a.m. Alina, Lakpa, and Marcus cleared the Hillary Step and were on the summit ridge. The weather was clear. Wind was manageable. Alina was tired but moving steadily. Marcus was filming. Lakpa set a pace he estimated would put them on the summit by 9:30 a.m. That timeline held. 9:37 a.m., Alina Sorokin stood on the summit of Mount Everest. Marcus filmed it. The metadata confirms. 9:37 a.m., 27.9881 degrees north, 86.9250 degrees east, 849 meters. She was there. She'd done it. Marcus captured 7 minutes of summit footage. Alina spoke to camera. She was emotional. She talked about her father. She talked about the janitor she'd filmed when she was 16. She said, "Everyone has a story. This is mine." She didn't mention Whitfield. She didn't mention the contract. She didn't mention Netflix. Just her father. And the janitor. At 9:44 a.m., Lakpa told her it was time to descend. She agreed. They started down. And that's when Lakpa saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 figures. Below them. Climbing upward. Slowly. One of them was being half carried by the other. Victor and Priya. They were at approximately 8 810 meters. Priya was barely conscious. Victor was supporting her with one arm and holding a camera with the other. He was filming. Lakpa lost his composure for the first and only time on the expedition. He screamed down at Victor, in Nepali first, then English. Go down now, what are you doing?" Victor didn't respond. He kept climbing. Priya's head was lolling. She was moving her legs, but barely. Alina saw them. According to Marcus's statement, she said, "Oh God, what did they do?" Lakpa made an immediate decision. He told Alina and Marcus to begin descending. He would go down to Victor and Priya and turn them around. Every minute at this altitude was a minute closer to death. Alina agreed. She and Marcus started down toward the Hillary Step. Lakpa descended toward Victor and Priya. This is where the accounts diverge. This is where the 93 minutes begin. Marcus's camera was running. He was descending with Alina. The metadata shows them moving steadily downward from 849 meters. At 10:15 a.m., they reached approximately 750 meters. Alina was moving well. She was tired but functional. The descent was going according to plan. Then she stopped. 10:22 a.m. GPS coordinates show Alina stationary at 720 meters for 6 minutes. Marcus's statement says she told him she felt dizzy. She sat down. She asked for water. He gave her his bottle. She drank. She stood up. She took 4 steps. She sat down again. Marcus radioed Lakpa. Lakpa was 200 meters above with Victor and Priya, trying to turn them around. He told Marcus, "Keep her moving. Do not let her sit. If she sits, she dies." Marcus tried. He pulled on Alina's arm. She stood. She walked. She sat again. 10:38 a.m. Alina's oxygen regulator showed her tank was at 11%. She'd been above 8,000 meters for over 23 hours. Her body was consuming oxygen faster than the system could deliver it. Marcus switched her to a fresh tank. Her breathing stabilized slightly. She stood again. She walked 10 meters. She stumbled. Marcus caught her. At 10:52 a.m., something happened that Marcus, Victor, and Lakpa all described differently. Marcus says Alina told him to keep filming. He says she looked at the camera, lucid for a moment, and said, "Don't stop, you promised." He says he kept the camera on her because she asked him to. Victor, who was now descending with Priya and Lakpa, approximately 150 meters above, says he looked down and saw Marcus standing over Alina with the camera pointed at her face while she was sitting motionless in the snow. Victor says Marcus was not helping her. He was filming her. Lakpa says he couldn't see clearly, the angle was wrong. But he heard Marcus on the radio say, "She's not moving. I don't know what to do. The camera's on. She told me not to stop." Lakpa's response, recorded in the radio log, "Forget the camera. Carry her. Drag her. Get her down." Marcus says he put the camera in his pack and tried to lift Alina. She was dead weight. He couldn't move her alone at that altitude. He was exhausted. His own oxygen was running low. He radioed for help. Lakpa was still dealing with Priya, who had lost consciousness entirely. Victor was supporting Priya's body while Lakpa tried to revive her. 4 people above 8,000 meters, 1 unconscious, 1 collapsing, 2 trying to save them. 0 external rescue available. The nearest other climbers were descending the Hillary Step, 300 meters below, and unaware of what was happening. 11:15 a.m. Alina stopped responding to Marcus's voice. He checked her pulse. It was there, faint. He shook her. No response. Her eyes were open but unfocused. He later described them as looking through me, not at me. The camera metadata shows that Marcus turned his camera back on at 11:18 a.m. He says he doesn't remember doing this. He says it was instinct, muscle memory. He'd been a cameraman for 15 years. The camera was an extension of his body. He turned it on without thinking. For the next 40 minutes, Marcus's camera recorded Alina Sorokin dying. He wasn't standing back watching. The GPS data shows he was right next to her. He adjusted her oxygen mask twice. He tried to prop her up against a rock. He talked to her constantly. He told her about her daughter's drawing. Wait, Alina didn't have a daughter. He told her about the janitor film. He told her she was going to be fine. He told her they'd finished the documentary. He was crying. The audio captures that clearly. He was sobbing and filming and trying to save her all at the same time. And he was failing at the only part that mattered. 11:58 a.m. Alina's breathing became irregular. Long pauses between breaths. Then rapid gasps. Then pauses again. Cheyne-Stokes respiration. A classic sign of severe cerebral edema. Her brain was swelling. There was no treatment available at 700 meters. A hyperbaric bag might have helped. It was at Camp 4, 1,000 meters below and hours away. 12:14 p.m. The metadata shows the camera was still recording. Alina's GPS position hadn't changed in 52 minutes. She was at 600 meters on a narrow section of the route just below the balcony. At 12:31 p.m., Lakpa reached Marcus. He'd left Victor with Priya at approximately 700 meters. Priya had regained partial consciousness but couldn't walk. Lakpa made the hardest decision of his career. He left 2 people above him to try to save 1 person below him. He chose Alina because she was his primary client. Because he was her guide. Because that's what guides do. When Lakpa reached Alina, he knew immediately. He checked her pulse. Nothing. He checked her breathing. Nothing. Her eyes were fixed. Her skin was gray. Alina Sorokin was dead. The time of death, estimated by investigators based on the breathing patterns captured on audio, was approximately 12:20 p.m. She had been on the summit 11 hours earlier. She was 34 years old. Lakpa turned to Marcus. Marcus was still holding the camera. Lakpa reached out and pressed the power button. The camera turned off. The metadata confirms. Recording ended at 12:33 p.m. Total recording time of the final session, 1 hour and 15 minutes. But combined with earlier footage from the descent, the complete record of Alina's final decline was approximately 93 minutes. Lakpa said one sentence to Marcus. Multiple sources confirm it. The camera should have been off 2 hours ago. Marcus didn't respond. He sat down in the snow next to Alina's body. Lakpa radioed base camp. He reported Alina's death. Then he said, "Victor and Priya are still above me. Priya cannot walk. I need help." There was no help. Not at that altitude. Not in that time frame. What happened to Victor and Priya over the next 5 hours is its own nightmare. Victor, alone with a semi-conscious Priya at 700 meters, managed to get her moving downward by 1:30 p.m. They descended at an agonizing pace. 2 other climbers from a different expedition encountered them at 500 meters and assisted. Priya was essentially carried down to the South Kernel. She would survive. She would spend 3 days in a hospital in Kathmandu. She would never climb again. She would never speak publicly about what happened. Victor descended under his own power. He reached Camp 4 at 6:45 p.m. He'd been above 8,000 meters for nearly 28 hours. When he arrived, he handed his camera, containing his own footage from the day, to a member of the support staff. Then he collapsed. Lakpa descended last. He passed Alina's body on his way down. He stopped for a moment. He unclipped her harness from the fixed line and reclipped it to a different anchor point, off the main route, so descending climbers wouldn't have to step over her. It was a small act of dignity. Then he continued down. He reached Camp 4 at 8:30 p.m. He didn't speak for 2 hours. When he finally did, the first thing he said was a question. He asked Yuri over the radio, "What time did the weather forecast say the window closed?" Yuri's response, "I told you, 4 p.m. Lakpa said, "The wind hit us at 2:15. You said 4. Explain." Yuri didn't respond. That silence, Yuri Volkov's silence at 8:30 p.m. on May 22, 2021, was the moment the official story began to crack. And it would take 11 months, a lawsuit, a whistleblower, and a forensic examination of deleted satellite communications to finally shatter it completely. Alina's body remains where Lakpa repositioned it. 600 meters below the balcony. Her camera mount still bolted to her pack. The camera itself removed by Marcus, who carried it down along with his own footage. 2 cameras. 93 minutes of Alina's death. And a promise, "Don't stop filming," that Marcus kept. Whether he should have kept it is the question that has defined every conversation about this disaster since. If you've been paying attention, you already know this isn't a simple answer. And you already know that Marcus isn't the only person who should be answering it. The investigation would take a year. What it found would destroy 2 companies, end 3 careers, and reveal a chain of deleted communications that proved Alina Sorokin's death was not an accident of altitude. It was a manufactured outcome of financial pressure, suppressed information, and a system that treated a human life as a deliverable. Chapter 5. The reckoning below. The news of Alina Sorokin's death reached the internet before it reached her family. A climber from the Spanish expedition, the team that had passed Alina's group early on summit day, posted on Instagram at 3:15 p.m. Nepali time on May 22nd. Sad news from Everest today. A filmmaker died during descent from the summit. R.I.P. No name, no details. But the climbing community is small. Within 2 hours, speculation was everywhere. By 6 p.m., Alina's name was on 3 mountaineering forums. By midnight, it was on Twitter. Alina's mother, Natasha, found out from a phone call at 11 p.m. Moscow time. It wasn't from Yuri Volkov. It wasn't from Summit East. It wasn't from Ridgeline Media. It was from a journalist. A Russian reporter from a Moscow tabloid called Natasha and asked for a comment about her daughter's death on Everest. Natasha didn't understand the question. She asked the reporter to repeat it. He did. She hung up and called Alina's satellite phone. No answer. She called 12 more times. No answer. Yuri Volkov contacted Natasha 8 hours later. 8 hours. By that point, she'd already confirmed her daughter's death through Pavel, who'd seen the news online from Helsinki. When Yuri finally called, Natasha's first question was, "Why did I hear this from a stranger?" Yuri had no answer. He offered condolences. Natasha asked for details. Yuri told her Alina had collapsed during descent due to altitude sickness. He said the weather had changed unexpectedly. He said the team did everything they could. He did not mention the deleted forecast. He did not mention the completion clause. He did not mention Victor and Priya's unauthorized ascent past the Hillary step. He gave her the cleanest possible version of the worst possible news. Tom Calder, Alina's ex-husband, learned from the BBC. A former colleague called him at 7 a.m. London time on May 23rd. Tom's reaction, as he later described it, "I felt sick, and then I felt furious. And then I felt guilty for feeling furious, because I'd told her not to go. And I couldn't stop thinking, if we hadn't divorced, would she still have gone? Would I have been there to talk her out of it? Or would I have just been another person she didn't listen to?" The immediate media coverage followed a predictable pattern. Instagram influencer dies on Everest. Filmmaker's fatal obsession. Social media star ignores Sherpa warning, pays ultimate price. The headlines were brutal. They were also incomplete. Every story focused on Alina's social media following. She had 340,000 Instagram followers, 180,000 on YouTube, as if her audience size was the cause of death. She was framed as a content-obsessed influencer who'd traded safety for footage. Lakpa's warning was the centerpiece of every article. The narrative was simple. Experienced Sherpa warns reckless influencer. Influencer ignores warning. Influencer dies. Mountain teaches lesson. It was the perfect story. Neat. Moral. Shareable, and it was missing everything that actually mattered. The Nepalese government's Department of Tourism opened a routine inquiry on May 25th. These inquiries happen after every Everest fatality. Most are perfunctory. A form is filled out. Cause of death is listed. The file is closed. Alina's inquiry was initially headed for the same outcome. Cause of death: exhaustion and cerebral edema during descent from the summit. Contributing factors: altitude, delayed turnaround, weather deterioration. Case closed. But 3 things prevented the file from closing quietly. The first was Lakpa Dorje. On May 28th, 6 days after Alina's death, Lakpa walked into the Department of Tourism office in Kathmandu. He brought a written statement, 9 pages, handwritten in Nepali. In it, he detailed every conversation he'd had with Yuri Volkov during the expedition, every radio call, every weather query, every response. He detailed the fictional 4 p.m. weather window. He stated that the actual weather deteriorated by 2:15 p.m., consistent with the Innsbruck forecast that Yuri had received and deleted. He stated that if the correct forecast had been shared, he would have enforced a turnaround at the balcony no later than 10 a.m. Alina would have been below the South Curl before the weather changed. She would have been alive. Lakpa's statement was explosive. But it was one man's word against another's. Yuri could simply deny receiving the forecast. He could say Lakpa was mistaken about the timeline. It would be he said. Except for the second thing. The second thing was Pemba Tushoring. Remember Pemba, the Sherpa Lakpa had talked to at base camp weeks earlier? Pemba worked for a different expedition operator. He had no connection to Summit East or Ridgeline Media. He had no agenda. He'd been monitoring weather forecasts independently throughout the season using a personal satellite messenger. On May 22nd, at 4:12 a.m., Pemba received the same Innsbruck forecast that Yuri had received at 3:47 a.m. Pemba still had it. He showed it to investigators. The forecast was unambiguous. Wind speeds above the South Col would exceed survivable limits by 2 p.m. Every expedition leader on the southeast ridge received this forecast. Every one of them except Yuri Volkov acted on it. 3 other expeditions enforced turnaround times based on the 2 p.m. window. Their clients all survived. The third thing was the cameras. Marcus Beal and Viktor Semenov each carried cameras with GPS-embedded metadata. The metadata provided an irrefutable timeline. It showed exactly where each person was, at exactly what time, doing exactly what. And that metadata contradicted Victor's account on 6 specific points. It contradicted Marcus's account on 3 points. And it revealed something neither of them had mentioned in their initial statements. Let me tell you what the metadata showed that neither cameraman disclosed. At 7:12 a.m. on May 22nd, while Alina, Marcus, and Lakpa were climbing toward the summit and Victor and Priya were supposed to be waiting at the Hillary Step, Victor's camera GPS showed him sending a satellite message. The message was to Ridgeline Media in London. Victor had a direct communication channel with the production company that Alina didn't know about. The message read, "Summit attempt continuing. Delay at Hillary Step. A and M proceeding to summit. P and I holding position. Request guidance on additional summit footage." Whitfield's response, received at 7:34 a.m. Additional summit angles essential. If conditions permit, proceed to summit with P for B-roll coverage. A's summit footage must be multi-angle for Netflix pitch. If conditions permit. Priya was barely conscious. The conditions did not permit, but Victor read Whitfield's message as an instruction, not a suggestion. He decided to take Priya to the summit. He made this decision without consulting Lakpa, without consulting Alina, without medical assessment. He took a semi-functional sound technician who'd never been above 4,000 meters before this expedition, and pushed her toward the summit of Everest because a man in London wanted a second camera angle. This communication was not disclosed to investigators in Victor's initial deposition. He was asked directly, "Did you receive any communications from Ridgeline Media on summit day?" His answer, "No." The metadata proved he was lying. When investigators confronted Victor with the satellite message records 4 months later, he changed his statement. He said he'd forgotten about the communication due to the stress of the event. He said Whitfield's message was a suggestion that he chose to follow because he believed conditions were safe. He denied that Ridgeline pressured him. Investigators didn't believe him. Neither did Alina's family. In September 2021, Natasha Sorokina and Pavel Sorokin retained a law firm in London. They filed a civil suit against 3 parties: Summit East, Yuri Volkov, Ridgeline Media, James Whitfield, and Viktor Semenov personally. The suit alleged wrongful death through negligence, suppression of safety-critical information, and reckless endangerment. The discovery process cracked the case open. Ridgeline's legal team fought to suppress internal communications. They lost. The court ordered disclosure. And what came out was devastating. 37 emails between Whitfield and Yuri Volkov over the course of the expedition. In those emails, the completion clause was discussed 14 times. Whitfield reminded Yuri repeatedly that summit footage was contractually required. In one email dated May 14th, 8 days before the summit push, Whitfield wrote, "I need to be blunt. Without summit footage, this project has zero commercial value. Zero. The meeting with Netflix is July 8th. If Alina doesn't summit, we're all done. You, me, and her." Yuri's response, "Understood. She will summit. She will summit. Not she will attempt. Not we will do our best. She will summit." As if the mountain were a conference room and success were a scheduling matter. Another email, dated May 19th, 3 days before the summit, showed Yuri asking Whitfield about the financial terms if the expedition was delayed by weather. Whitfield's response, "No delay. The window is the window. If she doesn't summit in this window, there's no budget for a second attempt. This is it." No budget for a second attempt. Yuri knew that if the weather window closed before Alina summited, the contract was dead. His company was dead. His debt was permanent. Every decision he made after reading that email was filtered through that knowledge. The lawsuit also revealed something about Marcus Beale that complicated the narrative further. Marcus had a side agreement with Ridgeline that Alina didn't know about. A bonus clause. If Marcus delivered what Whitfield called hero footage, defined as summit footage that could serve as a documentary centerpiece, Marcus would receive an additional £15,000 on top of his expedition fee. Marcus needed that money. He'd taken out a loan to cover his share of equipment costs. The bonus was his way out of debt. Did Marcus keep filming Alina's death because she told him to? Or because his bonus depended on dramatic footage? Or both? Marcus has never answered this question directly. His lawyer advised him not to. The investigation, the lawsuit, the leaked emails, all of this took over a year to unfold. During that time, the simple story, "Influencer ignores Sherpa, influencer dies," continued to dominate public discussion. It was easier, cleaner, didn't require reading court documents or understanding contractual pressure, or grappling with the idea that a woman's death was the predictable outcome of a financial system that treated human life as content. If you're still here, you understand that this isn't the story you thought it was. You came in thinking one woman made a bad decision. Now you know that at least 5 people made decisions that contributed to her death, and 2 of them were sitting in offices thousands of miles from the mountain. Subscribe if you want the full truth on stories like this. We go deeper than anyone. And we're not done yet, because the footage, those 93 minutes, has been seen by exactly 3 people outside the legal team. What they say is on that camera, and why their descriptions don't match, is the next piece of this puzzle, and it's the darkest piece of all. Chapter 6. What the camera saw. The footage exists on 2 SD cards. Marcus Beale's primary camera recorded one. Viktor Semenov's secondary camera recorded the other. Both were surrendered to Alina's family's legal team as part of the discovery process in February 2022. The cards were examined by a forensic digital media specialist hired by the court. Her name was Dr. Sarah Thornton, a former Metropolitan Police digital evidence analyst. Dr. Thornton's job was straightforward. Verify the footage was authentic, establish the timeline, and catalog the contents. She spent 4 days reviewing the material. In her report, filed in March 2022, she described Marcus's footage of the final descent as the most distressing audiovisual material I have encountered in 19 years of forensic work. She recommended that the footage never be released publicly. Alina's family agreed. Ridgeline Media, remarkably, also agreed, though their motivation was clearly liability, not compassion, so the footage has never been shown. But 3 people have described what's on it. Marcus Beale, in his legal deposition, Viktor Semenov, in his, and Dr. Thornton, in her forensic report. Their descriptions should align. They captured the same events. The cameras were in close proximity. The timeline is fixed by metadata. They don't align. On 9 specific details, the 3 accounts contradict each other. The first contradiction involves the moment Alina stopped walking. Marcus says she sat down at 10:22 a.m. and told him she felt dizzy. Victor says, based on what he could see from above, that Alina didn't sit down voluntarily. He says she fell. He says Marcus caught her and lowered her to a sitting position. Dr. Thornton's report describes the footage as showing the subject ceasing forward movement abruptly and descending to a seated position. The word abruptly is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Did she sit or did she fall? It matters. Sitting suggests she had some control. Falling suggests she was already in serious neurological decline. The distinction affects the timeline of when intervention could have saved her. The second contradiction is about the oxygen tank swap. Marcus says he switched Alina to a fresh tank at 10:38 a.m. Victor says the swap happened earlier, closer to 10:25 a.m. Dr. Thornton's metadata confirms 10:36 a.m. This seems minor, 2 minutes. But Victor's earlier timestamp matters, because in his account, the oxygen swap temporarily revived Alina, and then she declined again. In his version, Marcus had a 12-minute window where Alina was partially responsive and capable of being moved downward. If that's true, Marcus had a rescue window and didn't use it. Marcus denies this. He says the oxygen had minimal effect. He says she was never responsive enough to walk. The third contradiction, and this is the one that has generated the most controversy, involves the camera. Marcus says Alina asked him to keep filming. He says she looked at the camera, made eye contact, and said, "Don't stop. You promised." This is Marcus's emotional and legal defense. She asked him to film. He honored her wish. Victor says he never heard Alina say this. He was 150 meters above and couldn't hear clearly. But he says that from his vantage point, at no time did Alina appear to make eye contact with the camera or speak directly to Marcus in a way that suggested instruction. Dr. Thornton's report is the most significant. She analyzed the audio from Marcus's camera during the relevant time frame. She found audio that she describes as consistent with vocalization by the subject at approximately 10:55 a.m., but she could not confirm the words. The audio quality at that altitude, wind noise, breathing apparatus, fabric movement, made speech recognition impossible without enhancement. She sent the audio to an independent laboratory for spectral analysis. The lab's conclusion: vocalization detected, content indeterminate, insufficient clarity for transcript. So Marcus says Alina told him to keep filming. The audio confirms she made sounds. But nobody can prove she said what Marcus claims she said. This matters enormously. If Alina asked Marcus to film, he was honoring a dying woman's final professional wish. If she didn't, if she was making incoherent sounds of distress that Marcus interpreted as instruction, then he filmed a dying woman instead of focusing entirely on saving her. The legal and moral distance between those two scenarios is vast. There's a fourth contradiction that's less discussed but equally troubling. It involves what happened at 11:40 a.m., approximately 40 minutes before Alina's estimated time of death. Marcus says he attempted to physically lift Alina and carry her downward. He says he managed to move her approximately 3 meters before his strength gave out. He says he was in an advanced state of exhaustion and hypoxia himself. Victor's account doesn't mention this. He says that from his position above, he saw Marcus sitting next to Alina for an extended period without visible movement. He did not see a carry attempt. Dr. Thornton's GPS metadata shows Marcus's camera position shifting by 2.4 meters between 11:38 a.m. and 11:43 a.m., then returning to its previous position. This is consistent with a brief movement, possibly a carry attempt, possibly Marcus adjusting his own position. It's not conclusive either way. The fifth contradiction involves Lakpa. When Lakpa reached Marcus and Alina at 12:31 p.m., he found Alina dead and Marcus holding the camera. All three accounts agree on this. But they disagree on what Marcus was doing with the camera. Marcus says the camera was in his lap, turned on but not pointed at anything specific. He says he'd forgotten it was on. Muscle memory. Autopilot. Lakpa says Marcus was holding the camera at chest height, pointed at Alina's face. He says when he arrived, Marcus appeared to be filming Alina's body deliberately. Dr. Thornton's report describes the final frames of Marcus's footage as depicting the subject in a stationary supine position from approximately 1.2 meters distance, with stable framing consistent with deliberate camera positioning rather than incidental recording. Deliberate camera positioning. Dr. Thornton's professional assessment was that Marcus was actively filming Alina's body after death, Not accidentally. Deliberately. Marcus's lawyer challenged this interpretation. He argued that a camera resting in someone's lap at chest height could produce stable framing without deliberate intent. Dr. Thornton maintained her assessment but acknowledged it was interpretive, not definitive. The remaining contradictions involve smaller details. The exact sequence of radio calls, who suggested what at which moment, whether Priya was conscious or unconscious at specific times. Each one, individually, might be explained by the fog of trauma and hypoxia. People at extreme altitude don't form reliable memories. Stress distorts perception. Time becomes elastic. It's entirely possible that all three individuals are telling the truth as they remember it, and all three memories are wrong. But the pattern troubles investigators, because the contradictions consistently favor Marcus's narrative. In every disputed detail, Marcus's version makes him look more responsive, more caring, more constrained by circumstances. Victor's version and Dr. Thornton's evidence consistently suggest more passivity on Marcus's part. More filming, less rescuing. The climbing community split. Online forums became battlegrounds. Some people defended Marcus absolutely. He was at 700 meters. He was hypoxic. He was exhausted. He'd been climbing for 12 hours. No one can judge his actions at that altitude. He kept his promise to Alina. He did what she asked. Others condemned him. He was a professional cameraman with a 15,000-pound bonus riding on dramatic footage. He had a financial incentive to keep filming. Alina may or may not have asked him to continue. Even if she did, she was in neurological decline. How much weight should a dying person's instructions carry? At what point does professional obligation become moral failure? The ethical debate expanded beyond Marcus. It reached Ridgeline Media. Should a production company ever attach completion clauses to expeditions where death is a realistic outcome? Whitfield argued that completion clauses are standard in documentary production. He said Ridgeline didn't force anyone to climb. He said every participant was a consenting adult who understood the risks. But consenting adult becomes complicated when financial pressure removes the freedom to consent. Alina couldn't walk away from the summit, because walking away meant losing the film, the funding, and the career she'd sacrificed everything for. Yuri couldn't enforce safety protocols because enforcing them meant bankruptcy. Victor couldn't refuse Whitfield's summit instruction because his contract with Ridgeline included a performance clause tied to footage delivery. The entire system was designed so that the only path that made financial sense was the one that led up the mountain. Every path that led to safety also led to ruin. This is what Lakbadorje meant when he told investigators, nobody on that mountain was free. They were all prisoners. Prisoners of money, prisoners of contracts, prisoners of cameras. The mountain was the only free thing up there. And the mountain did what mountains do. The lawsuit settled in August 2022. Terms were confidential. Natasha Sorokina signed a non-disclosure agreement. Pavel Sorokin did the same. The settlement amount was never disclosed, but a source close to the family told a mountaineering journalist that the amount was substantial and came primarily from Ridgeline Media's insurance carrier. Summit East ceased operations in October 2021. Yuri Volkov left Nepal. His current whereabouts are not publicly known. No criminal charges were filed against him. The Nepalese government's inquiry concluded that his actions, while potentially negligent, did not meet the threshold for criminal prosecution under Nepalese law. Ridgeline Media restructured in early 2022. James Whitfield stepped down as head of production. He remains a shareholder. The company still operates. They no longer fund expedition-based documentaries. Their current slate includes a series about urban architecture and a film about competitive dog grooming. Viktor Semenov returned to Ukraine. He has not worked in film production since the expedition. He declined all interview requests. His deposition remains under seal as part of the settlement agreement. The only public record of his account is the contradictions identified in Dr. Thornton's forensic report. The footage remains with Alina's family. 2 SD cards in a safe deposit box in St. Petersburg. Natasha Sorokina has said she will never watch them. Pavel says he considered watching, but ultimately decided against it. I don't need to see my sister die, he told a journalist in 2023. I already know what happened. The cameras didn't save her. They helped kill her. And that leaves Marcus Beale, the man who kept his promise. The man who filmed his colleague's death and may or may not have been asked to. Marcus gave his depositions. He cooperated with investigators. He surrendered his camera and footage. And then, in March 2022, he stopped talking. No interviews, no social media, no public appearances. His last known professional credit was a corporate video for a pharmaceutical company in late 2021. His agent confirmed he is no longer taking work as a cinematographer. People who knew Marcus describe him as destroyed. Not by guilt exactly, by something more complicated, by the impossibility of answering the question that everyone asks, why didn't you put the camera down? Because the honest answer, she told me not to, isn't satisfying. And the more honest answer, I don't know if she really told me or if I needed to believe she did, is the kind of truth that doesn't fit in a headline or a court filing or a comment section. It's the kind of truth that lives inside one person, unresolvable, forever. The 93 minutes of footage sit in a safe deposit box in Russia. They will probably never be seen by the public. And maybe that's right, maybe some truths don't need to be filmed. Maybe Above Everything was a documentary that should never have been made. Maybe the most honest thing Alina Sorokin ever created was the film that destroyed her. Or maybe, and this is the possibility that haunts everyone involved, maybe the footage is exactly what Alina wanted. Raw, unfiltered, unwatchable. The truth about what happens above 8,000 meters when the oxygen runs out and the weather closes in and people have to choose between saving themselves and saving someone else. She wrote it in her journal, she said it to her crew, she made them promise. And the mountain answered. Chapter 7. What remains? 3 things changed because of Alina Sorokin's death. 3 concrete, measurable changes in how commercial expeditions operate on Everest. They're worth naming because they're the only parts of this story that resemble progress. First, in November 2021, the Nepal Ministry of Tourism revised its expedition permitting guidelines. Film crews operating above Camp 2 are now required to register separately and undergo an independent fitness assessment by a ministry-approved physician. Before Alina's death, film crew members were covered under the General Expedition Permit. No separate evaluation. No altitude-specific fitness threshold. Priya Chandra, a woman with 0 experience above 4,000 meters, was permitted to climb to 800 meters because her name was on an expedition roster. That's no longer possible. Film crew members must now demonstrate prior experience above 6,000 meters or pass a supervised acclimatization test. It's not a perfect system. It's still gameable. But it exists. And it didn't exist before May 22, 2021. Second, the International Federation of Mountain Guides Associations issued a recommendation in January 2022, not binding, but widely adopted, that expedition leaders must share all weather forecasts received during an expedition directly with clients. Not summarized, not interpreted, shared in full. The Yuri Volkov problem, a guide filtering weather data through his own financial interests, is now explicitly addressed by professional guidelines. Multiple major expedition operators, including Adventure Consultants, Alpenglow, and Madison Mountaineering, adopted this standard. Clients now receive the same forecasts their guides receive. At the same time, a guide can still recommend continuing or turning back, but the client sees the same data. The information asymmetry that killed Alina has been reduced, not eliminated. Reduced. Third, 2 major expedition insurance providers, Global Rescue and Ripcord, updated their underwriting criteria to flag completion clauses in production contracts. If an expedition is partially funded by a media company with a clause tying payment to summit achievement, the insurer now requires disclosure and may impose additional premium costs or exclusions. This doesn't prevent completion clauses from existing, but it creates a financial disincentive. If your contract incentivizes summiting at the expense of safety, your insurance gets more expensive or harder to obtain. Money talks. This change was directly traced to the Sorokin case by an industry trade publication. 3 changes. Real. Tangible. Probably sufficient to prevent the exact scenario that killed Alina from occurring. But here's the part that doesn't change. The part that never changes. People still die on Everest. 12 climbers died on Everest in the 2023 season. 5 in 2024. The causes vary. Weather, falls, exhaustion, cerebral edema, cardiac events. But the underlying pattern is identical to Alina's story. Financial pressure, time pressure, ego, sunk cost. The inability to turn around after investing so much money, time, identity into reaching the top. Alina's case was unusual because of the cameras, because of the production company, because of the Netflix pitch. But strip those away, and you have the same basic equation that has killed climbers on Everest for decades. The summit is worth more to them than their life. Not because they're stupid, because the system makes it that way. Subscribe if you understand that these stories matter beyond entertainment. We tell them because someone has to. And we tell them completely, not the headline version. Now, where they are today. Lakpa Dorje is 55 years old. He lives in Tam, his home village in the Solukhumbu district. After the 2021 season, he continued guiding on Everest for one more year. The 2022 spring season, he took a single client, a 52-year-old Canadian woman named Janet Park. He told her on the first day, "I will tell you the truth about conditions. If you don't like the truth, find another guide." Janet summited. She descended safely. She later wrote a blog post calling Lakpa the most honest man I've ever met on a mountain. After that season, Lakpa retired from Everest guiding. He didn't make a public announcement. He just stopped accepting bookings. He now works part-time training young Sherpas in high-altitude rescue techniques at a facility funded by the Himalayan Trust. When a journalist visited him in 2023 and asked about Alina, Lakpa said, "I think about her every day. Not because I failed. I did my job. I warned her. I warned everyone. But I think about her because she was a good person who wanted to tell a true story, and the truth killed her. That's not fair. But mountains aren't fair." He paused, then added, "The cameras should have stayed at base camp. That's all. That's the only thing that needed to be different." Marcus Beale is 39. He lives in Bristol, England. He left London in late 2021, sold his flat, gave up his studio space, moved to a one-bedroom rental near the harbor. He has not worked as a cinematographer since the pharmaceutical corporate video in late 2021. Former colleagues say he's working in a completely unrelated field. One source says logistics. Another says he manages inventory for a small warehouse. He doesn't talk about Everest. He doesn't talk about Alina. His social media accounts were deleted in April 2022. The last thing he posted on Instagram before deleting his account was a photo of his camera equipment, packed in cases, sitting on a curb. The caption was one word: done. People who knew Marcus before the expedition describe a fundamental change. He was passionate about filmmaking. Obsessive. The kind of cameraman who would spend 4 hours setting up a single shot. After Everest, that person disappeared. His former mentor at the BBC told a podcaster in 2023, "Marcus didn't just stop filming. He stopped seeing the world the way filmmakers see it. He used to look at everything and think about angles, light, story. Now he looks at things and sees things. Just things." The camera in his head turned off. Whether Marcus's actions on the mountain were justified, whether keeping the camera rolling was honoring Alina's wish or betraying her trust, is a question that will never be definitively answered. The audio can't be enhanced enough. The footage won't be released. Marcus won't explain. And the only person who could settle it is frozen at 600 meters on the southeast ridge, beyond the reach of testimony. Priya Chandra is 31. She returned to London after 3 days in a Kathmandu hospital. She was treated for frostbite on 4 fingers of her left hand. 2 fingertips were amputated. She has never spoken publicly about the expedition. Not once. No interviews. No written statements beyond her legal deposition, which is sealed. Her LinkedIn profile lists her occupation as audio engineer post-production. She works for a small audio studio in Shoreditch that produces podcasts. Her colleagues reportedly know about Everest but don't ask. A friend of Priya's told a journalist, "She doesn't talk about it. Not won't. Can't." Her therapist says she's processing it. She's been processing it for 3 years. Priya lost 2 fingertips, her sense of safety in the mountains, and something harder to name. She was 29 when Viktor Semenov told her to keep climbing past the Hillary step. She trusted him. He was the experienced one. He was the technical coordinator. When he said conditions were fine, she believed him. She had no way of knowing that Viktor was acting on a satellite message from James Whitfield. She had no way of knowing that the weather window was 2 hours shorter than everyone believed. She nearly died because a man in London wanted a second camera angle and a man in Krasnoyarsk couldn't afford to lose a client. Viktor Semenov is 43. He returned to Kyiv in June 2021. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Viktor's life, already fractured by Everest, was shattered again. His current status is uncertain. A mountaineering contact in Eastern Europe reported in late 2023 that Viktor had left Ukraine and was living in Poland. He has not responded to any journalists' inquiries since his legal deposition. His sealed testimony, particularly the contradiction about the Ridgeline satellite message, remains the most contentious piece of evidence in the case. If Viktor lied in his deposition about receiving Whitfield's instruction, he committed perjury. If he told the truth and simply forgot, then the stress of extreme altitude produced a convenient amnesia that protected both him and his employer. Yuri Volkov is 48. Summit East is dissolved. Its website went offline in December 2021. Yuri's mountaineering credentials were not revoked. There is no formal licensing body with the authority to do so. He is believed to be living in Russia. He has made no public statements since an interview with a Russian outdoor magazine in September 2021 in which he said, Alina Sorokin's death was a tragedy caused by the mountain and by circumstances beyond anyone's control. He did not mention the deleted forecast. He did not mention the completion clause. He did not mention lying to Lakba about the weather window. When the interviewer asked about the Innsbruck forecast specifically, Yuri ended the interview. No criminal charges were filed against Yuri Volkov in any jurisdiction. Nepal's inquiry closed without prosecution. Russia has no mechanism for prosecuting mountaineering negligence abroad. The UK Crown Prosecution Service reviewed the case at the request of Alina's family and declined to pursue charges, citing jurisdictional limitations and insufficient evidence of criminal intent. Yuri deleted a weather forecast, a woman died, and legally, those two facts couldn't be connected tightly enough to constitute a crime. James Whitfield is 51. He stepped down from Ridgeline Media's day-to-day operations, but retains an ownership stake. Ridgeline's insurance paid the settlement to Alina's family. Whitfield personally paid nothing. He gave one interview after the settlement to a trade publication called Broadcast Now, in which he said, "We are deeply saddened by the loss of Alina Sorokin." Ridgeline Media provided funding and creative support for her vision. All safety decisions were made by the expedition operator and the climbing team on the ground. We have reviewed our practices and will no longer fund projects in extreme environments. All safety decisions were made on the ground. That sentence does a lot of work. It distances Whitfield from the completion clause he wrote. From the satellite message Viktor received, telling him to take Priya to the summit. From the 11-minute phone call, in which he told Alina that a GoPro wasn't good enough, and the full crew had to go. Whitfield made those decisions from a desk in London. But legally, he was just a funder, just a voice on the phone, just a man who said summit footage is non-negotiable, and then watched from 6,000 miles away as a woman died trying to deliver it. And then, there's the documentary itself, above everything. The film Alina spent 3 years planning, divorced her husband for, drained her savings for, and died making. It was never completed. It was never pitched to Netflix. The July 8, 2021 meeting with Netflix Acquisitions was canceled. The footage, the 20 terabytes of material shot at base camp, on acclimatization rotations, at Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, and above, sits on hard drives in Ridgeline Media's archive. It technically belongs to Ridgeline under the production contract. Alina's family has requested the raw footage. Ridgeline has declined. The footage is corporate property. Natasha Sorokina is 70. She still lives in the same apartment in St. Petersburg where Alina grew up. The Sony Handycam, the one Dmitry bought at the flea market when Alina was 14, is on a shelf in the living room. Next to it is a framed photograph of Alina at K2 Base Camp in 2016, the trip that started everything. Natasha watches Alina's early films sometimes. The one about the janitor, the thesis film about Georgian refugees. She told a journalist, "Those films are who she was, not the mountain took her, but it didn't make her." Pavel Sorokin visits his mother every 2 months from Helsinki. He has taken over the family's legal affairs related to the case. He continues to push for the release of Alina's raw footage from Ridgeline's archives. He has been unsuccessful so far. He told a journalist in 2024, "My sister made films about people whose stories were ignored. Now her own story is being controlled by the people who helped kill her. If that's not irony, I don't know what is." Tom Calder, Alina's ex-husband, remarried in 2023. He has a son. He told a friend that he named the boy after Alina's father, Dmitry. When asked why, he said, "Because Alina would have liked that." Alina Sorokin's body remains at 8,600 meters on the southeast ridge of Mount Everest. She is one of approximately 200 bodies on the mountain. Climbers pass her every season. Most don't know who she is, a few do. A climbing guide named Dawa Tenzing told a podcaster in 2023 that he points her out to clients during descent. "I tell them, that woman had cameras, she had a plan, she had talent, she had warnings, she had everything except the one thing that would have saved her. Someone with the power to say no who actually said it. That's the lesson. Not that Alina was reckless, she wasn't. Not that she was arrogant, she wasn't. Not that she ignored a Sherpa's warning. She heard it. She considered it. She called London. London said no. And London, comfortable, warm, sea-level London, made the decision that killed her." The question isn't why Alina climbed. The question is why nobody stopped her. And the answer is that stopping her cost money. Climbing cost a life. And in the calculation that everyone around her made, consciously or unconsciously, the money mattered more. Until it didn't. Until she was sitting in the snow at 8,600 meters, and the money was meaningless, and the contracts were meaningless, and the Netflix meeting was meaningless, and the only thing that mattered was getting her down the mountain. By then, it was too late. Mountains don't kill people. Decisions kill people. And the most dangerous decisions aren't made at altitude. They're made in offices, in emails, in contracts, in phone calls where someone says summit footage is non-negotiable, and someone else says, "I understand." Alina understood. She understood the risks, the pressure, the stakes. She understood that her crew was slow, her timeline was tight, her Sherpa was worried. She understood all of it. And she went anyway, because the system she was in, the financial, creative, contractual system, had made turning back more expensive than dying. That system is still running. Right now. On Everest and on every other mountain where commercial operators sell summit dreams to people who can't afford to fail. The permits are still being issued, the contracts are still being signed, the weather forecasts are still being received. And somewhere, right now, someone is deciding whether to share the forecast or delete it, whether to say turn around or keep going, whether to put the camera down or keep filming. Alina wanted to show the truth about what happens above 8,000 meters. She got her wish. The truth is that the mountain is the least dangerous thing up there. The most dangerous thing is us. Her body faces south. Toward base camp. Toward Nepal. Toward the world that sent her up and couldn't bring her back. The camera mount is still bolted to her pack. Empty, waiting for a camera that will never return. Alina Sorokin wanted to make a film called Above Everything. In the end, the mountain was above everything. Above the contracts. Above the money. Above the footage. Above the truth, above the woman who went looking for it, and the mountain keeps what it takes.